I wanted Trump to react to my point that he is not a would-be Caesar, but he is a could-be Caesar. And he goes, basically, look, he goes, we need a lot of power in order to dismantle what they are doing to the country. He goes, but that's all I want. I just want the power to do that. I don't want any more than that. And I even then went into the whole thing about, this whole business about, will you ever leave? I go, you yourself are posting memes, Trump 28, Trump 32, you're trolling the left. Right. And they say you'll never leave. And his reaction is just priceless because he's like, do you know what I'm in for if I get reelected? Right. No normal person would stay beyond kind of the necessity of the time. So I think the film does bring out that added dimension of Trump. That's the centerpiece of the movie.
When you're making these movies, do you finish and are you hopeful or are you more black-pilled as to what our future is?
The way I look at it is I try to take a film and start with where the debate is now. So, for example, the debate might be the person who says that Trump lacks character, but has good policies. And then I say, well, look, I think there needs to be a character defense of Trump. So Trump won't himself do it. Mm-hmm. Trump, in fact, interestingly, hides some of his best qualities. Very strange to say, but when I was pardoned by Trump in 2018, my family got to sit down with him in the Oval Office in November of 19. My wife asked him the following question. She said, hey, President Trump, you get like slashed and burned on every platform, every second of every day. Like, how do you take it? Like, how does a normal person endure that? And we kind of expected Trump to go, well, these people are idiots. I enjoy it. The whole thing's fun. Yeah. But no, he sat back and he was like, well, guys, he goes, I have to admit, at the end of the day, it gets to me. He goes, because, I don't really need this. I'm doing it for the country. I just got al-Baghdadi. And so he's like, and look at the reaction of that. Yeah. So when Debbie and I left, we looked at each other and we said, Trump needs to show that aspect of a little vulnerability, a little introspection, but he won't do it. He doesn't want to do it. When he was on with Dr. Phil kept on with the, how did it make you feel? And Trump just refused to go there. So I was determined in this film to sit, even closer than we're sitting, face to face, and try to bring out that aspect of Trump that I had seen. I knew it's part of the private Trump. Other people have told me about it, but he doesn't put it on the public stage.
And do you feel like you were able to accomplish that to whatever degree you were going for it?
Yes, and my strategy was to ask him the unexpected question. So, for example, this is a typical one. I go, a lot of people say you called for an insurrection. And I said, as far as I can see, you didn't actually do that. You didn't call for anyone to go inside the Capitol, stop the count. You didn't do that. I said, but guess what? If you had called for an insurrection on January 6th, there would have been one. And there would probably be one if you called for one now. What do you want to do with that kind of power? You may be the only guy in the country. I mean, think about it. No one else can call for an insurrection. Even if Kamala Harris called for an insurrection, it would be a joke. Yeah. And the same is true of any other Republican.
They can just subtly get people to burn down cities.
Yeah, well, that's true.
It's a subtle signal, yeah.
Right. So Trump, you can see with Trump, the tumblers are like going in his mind, and he reacts to it in a very interesting way. So getting Trump to pause and think, you always get something surprising and thoughtful out of him that you might not otherwise, because he does have the Trumpian shtick, and that is always his go-to.
And what did you get out of him on that?
So what I got out of him out of that was this, and I'll put it in a slightly different context. Lincoln, as a young man, gave it's now called the Lyceum speech. Mm-hmm. In the Lyceum speech, Lincoln goes, America our constitutional republic is very strong. It's very hard to subvert it. It's not going to be subverted from the outside. If it's ever subverted, it's going to come from the inside. And then Lincoln says the way that will happen is that a kind of lawlessness will start breaking out around the country. But that's not even the real danger. The real danger is that a Caesar, a Napoleon, an Alexander the Great will tap into that and use that lawlessness to subvert the constitutional republic. And of course, the left, and there's been several articles and commentaries to this effect, they go, oh yeah, well, Lincoln was prophetic. It's Trump. He's the Caesar. He's the dictator. So I specifically invoked Lincoln, asked Trump to reflect on power in this context. And here's the point I was getting at is that, you know, the reason the left calls you a Caesar, the reason they call you a dictator is you do have a larger than life dimension. And so they think that you could do it. And they said that by the way of Lincoln. Remember, Lincoln was accused of being a tyrant. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus and go, this guy's a tyrant. When John Wilkes Booth assassinated Lincoln, he shouted, the Latin version, but he shouted, this is what happens to tyrants. So I wanted Trump to react to my point that he is not a would-be Caesar, but he is a could-be Caesar. And he goes, basically, look, he goes, we need a lot of power in order to dismantle what they are doing to the country. He goes, but that's all I want. I just want the power to do that. I don't want any more than that. And I even then went into the whole thing about, you know, this whole business about, will you ever leave? I go, you yourself are posting memes, Trump 28, Trump 32, you're trolling the left. Right. And they say you'll never leave. And his reaction is just priceless because he's like, do you know what I'm in for if I get reelected? Right. You know, no normal person would stay beyond kind of the necessity of the time. So I think the film does bring out that added dimension of Trump. That's the centerpiece of the movie. We also have very entertaining recreations, and I like to make my films very cinematic so that they're not a typical documentary, put it that way. They're more like a movie. Some people call them a docudrama. And but this is a film that someone who even didn't like Trump would enjoy, and they'd go, as they left the theater. It would get them thinking.
Did you get anything on the sort of really personal side of him? Because one of the things that changed me on Trump was, my audience has heard this, I'll give you the very brief version, was I had dinner with Junior at Mar-a-Lago and he said, do you want to meet my dad? Of course. Two tables over is that it's the week of the first presidency, right before Christmas, whatever year the first impeachment, whatever that was, I don't even remember what year. It was 21 maybe? No, of course not 21. No, 18. So 18, was it 18? Yeah. So it was right before Christmas in 18. And we get introduced, and then I said something to him, and he turns, Melania's across the table, and he puts his hand on her hand, and he says, honey, I want you to hear this. And he had me retell what I had just told him. It doesn't even matter what it was. But I thought the way he put his hand on his wife's hand and said, honey, I want you to hear this. And I thought, wait a minute. If you listen to the media, they hate each other. She hates him. But it was so natural what happened. Right. So unless he was just acting completely, and her reaction was completely authentic too. Did you get anything like that to just get more of like the family side or the personal side?
I begin with some of that because I think here's what I say. I say, look, Trump is a very strange character if you think about it, because you can't name too many people for whom there's a substantial number of people who would take a bullet for the guy. And there's a substantial number of people who would cheer if somebody put a bullet into the guy. You have to go back to Lincoln to find a character of comparable divisiveness, right? And yet, with Lincoln, the divisiveness wasn't over him. There were comments that Lincoln is a barbarian, Lincoln is a guerrilla, but the controversy was really over slavery and the extension of slavery. But with Trump, as you know, it's mainly about the man. And so we begin the movie with we show quite touching scenes of Trump with family, particularly with the grandkids, because he is very much the affectionate, tickle you in the belly and watch you laugh and giggle. And that side of Trump is completely suppressed by the media. Trump has certain pet peeves, and his pet peeves are extremely normal. So every time Debbie and I see him, he will always remind us, he go, Dinesh, I'm really glad I pardoned you. And he says, but I'm not so glad, this is the point of the story, I pardoned Scooter Libby, right? And we always dutifully say, why, even though we've actually heard. And he goes on to say, because he goes, right after I pardoned Scooter Libby, he went to a fundraiser for Liz Cheney. And he goes, who does that, right? Yeah. So he goes, I didn't want to call him. So he goes, I had some of my people kind of raise it with him. And he goes, and Scooter Libby was like, what? As if like he didn't get it. He didn't understand why Trump might even be perturbed about this. But for Trump, loyalty is a big deal, you know, and so for Trump, he is almost kind of, I mean, it reminded me, he's a little bit like the opening scene of The Godfather. And I don't mean the analogy and obviously the full sense of the term, but for Trump, it is like, I'll do something for you, but I expect you to be willing to return the favor if you can.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop screaming, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.